active member? The kind that would be missed? Or are you just content that your name is on the list? Do you attend the meetings and mingle with the flock? Or do you just stay at home and criticize and knock? Do you take an active part to help the club along? Or are you satisfied to just belong? To push the cause along and make things really thick? Or leave the work to just a few and talk about the clique? Think this over, brother. You know right from wrong. Are you an active member? Or do you just belong?
Welcome to Patched, where we look at the personal impact of life in outlaw motorcycle clubs. This week, my co-host, Justin Mooch DeLoretto, and I sit down with Gray, former member of the Pagan's Motorcycle Club. Thank you for joining us and welcome to the Patch Podcast. We have a couple of questions from last week's episode. We'd just like to go through some of those today. Let me shoot one at Mooch really quick.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about your book? That came up a lot, questions from last week's episode. Can you talk about your book and maybe show us or tell us where we can find it?
For sure, yeah. It's happy to be back, first of all. Last week was great, so I'm happy to be back and be on with everybody. I wrote a book after leaving club life. It's called The Ride of My Life. It's available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble. It's through Dark Frog Publishing, so any major retailer that sells books, you can pick it up. Amazon's probably the easiest. And it pretty much, being in the Mongols is part of my story, but that's not my whole story. And so the book really covers my life story from, punk rock scene and street gangs into motorcycle clubs and then into social work. It's my life story all put down in one place.
And I read it. It was a good book. Great read.
Thank you.
Another question we had from last week that a lot of people are asking is, what is our status from our club after leaving? Speaking personally about myself, my status is out bad. Now, what does that mean? That means I can't be in contact with anybody that's in the club still. That's against our rules, and it could hinder members of our club from being in good standing themselves, and I wouldn't want that on anyone. So I have no ill feelings to anybody that can't talk to me, and whenever I hear that they have left the club, I reach out to them, and before you know it, it's right back like it was before. So, Mooch, would you like to touch on that subject?
Yeah, my status is out bad as well. I know every club probably does a little bit different, but in my situation, it's pretty standard or similar to yours. I've just put on a no contact. Active members aren't allowed to talk to me. And when I was an active member, I was a stickler for the rules, and I understand what comes with being out bad. And so, same as you, I don't hold any grudges to the guys that can't talk to me anymore, and chose to follow the rules. That's the life we signed up for, and we knew the consequences, right, when we signed up. So I think we're both pretty much out bad and no contact, and it sounds like both of us, there's no ill will. I have, I'm a proud member of the club I was in, but I'm also happy and proud to be moving on without it. So that's where I'm at with it at this point.
Great. Can you tell us a little bit about your background and maybe about your club status from being a pagan?
Yeah. So initially, I was not out good. However, it changed for me. I ended up getting a pass a few months later when things came to light. But for me, it was, I was already out. So. That's kind of what it was. But I found another home, and I found another club. So I'm an active club member now, and I'm active status.
That's great. Good to hear. Gray, you want to give us a little background on your life prior to motorcycle clubs?
Prior to motorcycle clubs, yeah. So I started clubs very, very early in life, but I didn't start prospecting until I got out of the service. So I was in the Coast Guard for, almost 5 years. And I lived on a cutter. I was a navigator. And when I got out of the Coast Guard, I actually got out with a medical discharge, honorable medical, and with severe PTSD. And so when I got out initially, I kind of had a touch of agoraphobia. And I barely left the house. You kind of had to drag me out of the house.
For those that don't know what agoraphobia is, it means you do not want to leave where you're at. Is that the best way to describe it, Gray?
Yeah, well, yeah, it's almost like a fear of leaving the house. So yeah, I had to kind of push through that, and for me to do that, motorcycles really helped. That was something I had grown up doing, was riding bikes and ATVs and being around, the guys, as a young man. And so when I got out of the service and I started trying to fix my mental health, I went and bought a motorcycle and then, ended up in a small club. Just kind of how it went, full of veterans,
That's great. Mooch, you want to touch on that?
When you say you grew up around motorcycles, what was it like? Family members had motorcycles, neighborhood kids? What was that environment like?
So my dad had a Harley, and when he would come home from work, I would hear the motorcycle and I would run to the door. I'd run outside, and the story goes that was actually the second word that I said was motorcycle, because I related that to Dad, because I would get excited every time I would hear it. So growing up, my dad, my parents ended up divorcing, but he was really good about making sure that I had ATVs and things like that to whenever I would go see him. And so that was one of the best parts of my upbringing was riding around in the mountains in Arkansas and riding around the rivers in Texas. And so when I was trying to find a good place to get back to when I got out of the service, that was kind of one of the things I jumped right into, was riding again.
What was the first motorcycle you got?
The first one, me and my brother shared, right? We had to share everything, right? But we had a little 125 Honda. Remember those little Enduros, and they had headlights and taillights and metal tanks?
Yeah.
It was like a 76 model, and we beat that thing to hell and back. But yeah, that was probably the first one.
What about your first Harley?
My first Harley was a basket case. It was a shovel head that basically was in a box. I mean, it was just falling apart. And that's how I got into the club. Ended up taking it to a shop and met some club members and hanging out at the shop all the time, putting that motorcycle back together. That's how I ended up in the first club.
And that was before you went into the service.
No, that was when I got out.
When you got out. Got it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I never bought a Harley before I went in or while I was in. I couldn't afford it. Had the wife and kids and all that. And the first one I bought, it was I think I spent $3,000 on it, and it was falling apart. And that was in 2003. So it was over 20 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So what kind of things attracted you to club life? I mean, obviously you met these guys while you're working on bikes and they were into bikes, but what other aspects attracted you to club life?
They had to talk me into it. They really did. I was always around because I enjoyed the camaraderie, but I wouldn't commit and I wouldn't prospect and I wouldn't wear a patch, and I was never had a hard time picking up ladies, and so I didn't join for the girls, and I had plenty of friends already, so I didn't need that, and I really wasn't gonna do it. And what finally ended up happening was one of my friends that I had grown up with decided he was gonna prospect, and he was like, all right, I'm going to prospect. So let's prospect together, and it'll be easy, and we can help each other out, and we'll become members, and it'll be with us. And so he taught me into it, one night over beers, and then I just never looked back. And so I've moved on from that club into a different club, and I've been in clubs that were absorbed by clubs. I've been all the way through the ringer, and been in multiple 1% clubs now. I'll probably die a patch holder unless my club runs me off.
How was the emotional reaction from your family, your wife? When you said you wanted to join a club, and how did that get better over time, or was it always the same, or how did that go?
Well, my first wife didn't last. We ended up in divorce. About a year after I joined the first club, we ended up in divorce. And she wasn't down with the lifestyle at all. She wasn't into it at all. She didn't like going to the clubhouse. She didn't even like riding, and she was pissed off when I bought the bike, and then I had 3 bikes in the garage when we got divorced. She was good and pissed off. But I was at a point in my life where I was going to make me happy. And we were really young, got married really young. And and she's happily married now, doing her own thing. But yeah, when my first marriage didn't last at all, I found a woman since I was in the club that I actually started dating as a member, and I've been with her now for 20 years. So.
Yeah, more
It's
common
actually a
interests.
topic Jason and I talked about last week. The guys that join a club that are already in a relationship or married, generally their lifestyle changes, right? They go from being devoted partner, having all this time with the family, and now they're devoting a lot of time to club life, versus the partner that starts dating you once you're already in the club and they met you at that level, right?
Yeah,
Was that kind of your experience as well? Like meeting somebody after you're already in the club seemed like it went better, right, than meeting someone.
100%. I always tell the guys when someone comes to me and goes, "Man, I'm thinking about buying a Harley and maybe trying to prospect." I ask them, "Are you happily married?" because if you are, you may seriously want to rethink this whole thing, because if she's not down,
it makes it tough.
If something's going to break, and you're either not going to be a member long, or you're going to get a divorce, and something's going to break. And so I actually will bring, when I have a new guy coming around, a lot of times I'll talk to his old lady and go, "Do you realize what this is?" Because I honestly don't want any phone calls with you crying because, he has to go to a mandatory run. I don't want to hear it. You know what I mean? So. Yeah.
No, and I think that's good.
We've both seen that it doesn't work if, you're out on a run, the member's out on a run, and his wife's calling his phone and blowing him up, or he's got to rush home quick. Like, he's not all in. Typically, you're trying to balance these two fields, and you're not 100% in on either one of them.
Yeah, you get where you're going. Your phone battery's dead because it's been ringing in your pocket for 3 hours.
Yeah, you're in trouble. You're in trouble right when you get there, and you're in trouble when you get home. Yeah, it's a mental stress.
Yeah, it's really tough on marriages for women that are not into the scene. If she's not into the scene, doesn't enjoy being around it, then it makes it really tough for most people. Some people can do it. I know people that do it, and their old lady never comes around. You never see them, and they keep it separate. And they've been doing it that way for years. But I never could figure that out.
So, Gray, how did you find what worked for you when it came to balancing your marriage and relationship with the club?
Man, I tell you, after, like I said, I've been with her for 20 years. We've been married for 15 years this year. And I have been a member of a club the majority of that time. I've prospected several times since I've been with her. And I think the main reason that it really works is because she understands that it is what I need. It's for my mental health. It really, really is. I kind of have to be around brothers with that camaraderie. At least, every once in a while, like I've got to have a release where I can go and just be myself. And she understands that. When we first started dating, I was already a patched member, and she's seen the whole thing. I mean, she's seen me go to jail. She's been charged. Right. She's been through the ringer. And if anything, I think it probably brought us closer, because I don't think anything could tear us apart at this point. I mean, we have absolutely been through things that most couples will never go through because of this drive, this ride that we've been on. And I mean, she's glued my head back together in the middle of the night. You know what I mean? I mean, she's not scared, and she's not going to run off. And I think that's what it takes. You have to have somebody that just supports you 100%. That's going to be there. Yeah.
You made a mention, Gray, of she knows that you need to get out and be with the brothers, that you need to get on that bike, and I think that's a huge thing, to have a partner that recognizes who you are and who you're going to be if you don't have that release, or you don't have that extra activity that you need to get into your system, right? You're going to go down a dark road if you don't go get on that bike and hang out with those brothers, every so often, and that is what we're talking about here. That is mental health, by understanding your own person and, you know, understanding what you need for your own mental clarity to have the reset button hit. You know, every time I got on the bike and rode up and down the highway and came home, I felt like, okay, cool, I can tackle tomorrow, you know? And I think that that's something really, really great that you just talked about, because that just kind of talks. That's a similar trait that every single guy with a patch, or even on two wheels, even the guys that just ride to Sturgis during the summer, I mean, they look forward to that trip all year long, and then they do it, and they get back, and it's a reset, it's a mind, you know, readjustment. So I think that just speaking about that is huge, and I'm sure Mooch has a few things to say about that, but that all of us have that in us, basically, is what I'm saying. We're all connected by just that one simple trait, which is if we don't get on that bike, it starts to wear on us mentally, and eventually it will affect us, and it will affect the people around us. And that's the first step, is acknowledging that we know that. So really appreciate sharing that.
Yeah.
Can you tell us what the difference is like nowadays as opposed to when you started, you know, in your 20s, and where you're at now? With how have you seen the clubs change?
Well, you know, when I first joined, right after I got my patch, that infamous show came out, right? The Sons of Anarchy, right? And and for a while, I like to say we had the Sons of Anarchy generation, right, of guys that were coming in. We even had guys that were naming themselves after characters from the damn TV show. You know what I mean? Like we had guys, they're road naming. Hey, I'm Opie now. You know, I'm happy. You know what I mean? And,
Yeah.
I mean, really, you know, and those guys, of course. I mean, it just kind of. When they came in, they had an expectation of club life that was not real, and I honestly think they kind of screwed up the whole scene. You know, there was these guys came in and they almost destroyed the whole scene with the level of violence. When I first joined, all of the serious violence had kind of calmed down, and people had gone back to just fist fights and barroom brawls and things like that. And it seemed like about 15 years ago or so, things started, you know, getting stupid again. And then, of course, with the big deal in Waco, we saw a huge change in Texas. You know, I had several friends that were there that day. I was supposed to be there that day. By the grace of God, I wasn't there.
And really quick, not to interrupt, but for the people the viewers that don't know a lot about Waco, could you give us like a snapshot of it? I know there's a lot to it, but can you give like the simplified version for our viewers that don't know what happened?
Yeah, I mean, it was an area meeting, just so to speak. They had a big meeting, and they had that same meeting about every 3 months at the Twin Peaks bar there in Waco. It was a very common thing, but in this particular one, a fight broke out in the parking lot between two clubs, and a whole bunch of police officers started shooting people, basically. And so we had, I forget how many people were actually shot, but I want to say it was how many died? What was it, 14 that died or something like that? It was.
Yeah, I wanted to say it was somewhere around 9, but either way.
I know 9. Yeah. I know there was the 9 from just one club, right?
You can look.
That died, but
You can look all this up on the Atlantic Press. They came out with some pretty good articles about the Waco shooting. To clarify on what kind of a meeting that was, it was like a coalition of clubs meetings, which basically is where all the clubs get together and kind of just talk about local business, or, you know, what's going on with law enforcement. It's nothing politics-wise between clubs. That all stays neutral, just so everyone's aware at home. It's just a meeting for people to get together, send representatives, and know what's going on in your state or your area. So a meeting like that, just a simple thing like that, can turn into a violent place real quick.
Well, people went to jail, stayed in jail for over a year in some cases on $1 million bonds. People lost their jobs, their houses, their families, you know, and I mean, they arrested people that were with the American Legion. You know, they arrested all kinds of people that were not in quote unquote outlaw clubs. They just everybody with a motorcycle. They just started arresting them all.
I was in California in my garage. My neighbor came over and said, "Did you see it on the news what just happened?" And it was the Waco shooting. I immediately got on the phone with a member from a Bandito support club who I knew, Paul, and he was actually there, and he answered his phone and said, "They're getting ready to load us on buses, Jay, and I'll be in touch when I can." And we didn't talk to those people for 3 to 4 weeks. They were locked up and phones in the trash can. And you can only imagine. Can you be away from your work, family, and life for 4 weeks with no explanation and no contact? People
longer. Like I said, some of them for years.
Mm-hmm.
I had personal friends that were in there for over a year that they kept in there.
Like Gray said, and I agree with him 100%, there are people there that lost a lot of stuff for showing up to a everyday coalition of clubs meeting just to be part of the culture. So it was a tragedy.
So Gray, when something like that heavy happened, something that serious, and potentially you were supposed to be there, right? Thankfully you were not.
Oh, yeah.
How did that affect your relationship? How did your wife feel about something like that?
Oh man, yeah. Everything in this part of the country kind of shut down. The police got so hard on the clubs. Everyone started running slickback, like pretty much everywhere. Like it didn't really matter what club. Like everybody was running slickback. That happened for a while. And
hey, Gray, can you tell us real quick, just so the people listening at home, what's the definition for what you just said there?
Slickback. So, yeah, people started running without colors, and you would see groups of guys riding down the road uniform, and you would know they were in a club, but you wouldn't know what club they were in. I think that freaked out people more than anything else. That was one of the biggest changes, and it was that way for a while. I don't remember how many months, or maybe it was over a year, but yeah, for me, it pissed me off more than anything else, because the more I read about it, and the people I knew that were there, that lost everything, and then people that were injured. Not everyone was killed. Mm-hmm. There was people that were just injured and maimed, and so I was just really, really pissed off. When all of it was, when all the dust cleared, I ended up joining one of those clubs. I actually became a 1% Cossack when all the dust cleared, and all I could do was pity the guys that got caught up in that. I think it was a travesty.
So let me ask you something, Gray. So this big national thing happens, people die, and you decide you want to join that club. What was your mindset like? Like, what attracted you to that specific club at that pretty hectic time?
I don't know. I think I've just always been what attracted me to them, they actually came to me. So I didn't go to them. And in that period of time, when all of that happened, I started my own club. When all the other clubs, when everybody I couldn't find anybody, and I started my own club. And I had 13 guys, and we started our own club in a county where there was never a club, or where there wasn't a club. And we knew that we would get absorbed because we were surrounded by big clubs. And we knew, and when we did it, we were like, oh, it's just a matter of time before we get absorbed. But we did it. We started a club, and that club did get absorbed. That's how it ended up going. And it was the 1% Cossacks that absorbed the club. And so, like I said, I've been in clubs that were absorbed. I've kind of been through the ringer with all that, but I knew when those guys started getting out of jail, the $1 million crew is what they called them. When they started getting out of jail, they hit me up, and they were like, "So I hear you got your own club," and I was like, "Yeah, no, I do, and you might as well come party with us." so I did, and then we all ended up becoming 1% Cossacks.
So all 13 guys joined the Cossacks?
They didn't all do it. No, Several of them decided to just step away altogether, but the majority of the guys, they voted. And that club voted on everything, and so yeah.
What about explaining to the viewers what that was like, being in a small club of 13 of your friends you started yourself versus joining a 1%er club in a big state?
Yeah, like going to the next level.
I knew it was going to happen, so we were already kind of prepared for it, because that's just kind of how it goes. When you have a small club. And we were ready for it for the most part. There was a few guys that I don't think really thought it was going to happen. And they're the ones that stepped away, but the rest of us, we were ready for it. And for me, there's just nothing more American than being on a bike with your bros. There's just nothing more American than that. And like I said, I'll probably always be in a club unless I get run off. I'll always be in a club. And for me, it's just I just kind of have to have that in my life. And I wasn't going to be around and be a part of the culture and watch it be destroyed by anybody. And for me, it's about the culture. And I do my very best to get along with people from clubs all over the country. And I like to promote the culture. And when I saw what the police did, I took it as they were trying to destroy the culture. And at that point in my life, and I just wasn't going to stand around and watch it be destroyed. And so I decided to help it manifest and help it grow.
No, and that's what transpired out of that. That's what the NCOC came out of that, and a lot of good people stepped up to the plate and got a lot of clubs involved. People were able to speak to their club, and even I spoke to my club saying, can we afford to be locked up for 4 weeks? I mean, can everyone in this room be locked up for 4 weeks without any say? What are you going to do? What are you going to tell your family? What are you going to tell work? I mean, they already know you're in this biker club, and we're already at, a low level to them. By saying that you're not going to be around for 4 weeks, I mean, you're forgotten. You know what I'm saying? So that's a very tough thing to watch. It's a very tough thing to then all of a sudden jump in and say, I want to be a part of, putting a stand to this. I mean, that's what a lot of us did. Takes a lot of extra work. It's not showing up to one meeting a week and saying that everything's fine. It's phone calls and extra runs and traveling to different states, and like you said, Gray, like meeting brothers from other clubs and being accepted of them because they're on the same page trying to fight the same battle. It's like Mooch can testify to this. It's like if we don't have the whole group working together on one thing like they did for so many years in the Mongols, I mean, like all the people that got behind them to save the patch, I mean, if we didn't all get behind it, then it would have been lost before it even got out of the gate. I mean, that's all I gotta say. It's like it took all of us, at least those who were involved, to get behind it. Otherwise, we'd be drowning. So that was a great story when they beat the feds to keep the ownership of their patch. That's what you're talking about. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And they also were a club that rode without their insignias on for years. And Mooch, you could probably talk a little bit more about that, but I remember seeing you guys, at certain parts of the night in certain freeways, and there would only be like maybe a bandana to signify that they were part of the Mongols, or a T-shirt. You guys had like a specific T-shirt you guys would wear. I remember Dave talking about it, but Mooch, I'll let you talk about that. That's your club stuff.
Yeah, well, when the government took, during Operation Black Rain, 2008, one of the things the government did was they did a racketeering charge against the whole club. And at the time, they actually had they were trying to get the club to forfeit its club name and logo, its insignia. And they granted an injunction so that no one could wear that patch or have anything with that symbol on it. In fact, law enforcement was breaking into people's houses and cars and taking things that had that insignia on it. If it was on your motorcycle, they would take your motorcycle. At one point, they had the right. Well, it was proven they didn't in court later, but at the time, they thought they had the right to pull someone over and physically take the patch off their back. And in order to kind of limit the type of incidents or issues brothers would have fighting with law enforcement, kind of a lose-lose battle there, that we had a T-shirt that just said Black and White Nation on it that signified who we were and what we rode with. But it was a T-shirt. It's like you said, a lot of times we're wearing jackets or sweatshirts or other stuff, and you wouldn't even see it. And so they had to go through that for a long time. In fact, that case just wrapped up, I think, 2 years ago, year and a half ago, where they finally, Court of Appeals ruled that they couldn't legally take the Mongols patch. And I think another cool segue here is we just talked about, we've talked about this before, the death or jail adage that comes with motorcycle clubs, right? And Gray, I think you made a pretty good example of you can go to a meeting and get killed or end up in jail, right? I mean, that's what comes with motorcycle club life. But what about the positive? So, if there's all this negative stuff, not a lot of people would join, right? And there's a lot of positive things that go on with club life. So what were some takeaways that you got from club life?
Again, I'm still involved. And at this point, I know exactly why. why I still do it. You know, I mean, it's a family for me. It's a chosen family. And when people talk about blood is thicker than water, a lot of times they don't understand what that really means. And that original quote's a lot longer than that, and I'd get it wrong if I tried to say the whole thing now. But what it boils down to is the men that will stand with you, right? The men that will stand with you and bleed with you, that blood, that means more than anything. And so I've had men that I ride with that I know would stand with me and never run, no matter what. And I'll never leave them. You know what I mean? You'll have to drag me away kicking and screaming. It's loyalty, it's family, and I would be alone in this world. I would be, man, it would be terrible for my mental health, for my psyche to not have somewhere to go and to somewhere to ride, you know, and clubhouses all across the country that I could just ride to anytime I get, you know, an urge to do it. Like, it would just really, really hurt my feelings at this point. I'm used to it now. I've been doing it too long. And so I mean, it's me. It's who I am. I'll never, ever change. And even if I was kicked out, you know, I would still try to find a group of guys that I could ride with, even if I didn't have a patch. You know what I mean? That it's just who I am.
And just to touch base on that, Gray, I mean, that's huge that you would, you know, no matter what, even if you were out of the club, you're still going to find a group of guys to ride with. You know that you need them mentally, right? And I think that there's
I know I do. I've proven it. I've been in different clubs. I've seen, you know, I've been without a patch. I've been reprospected. You know, I mean, I've been disciplined. I've been through the ropes, and I decided a long time ago I need it in my life. I have to have the outlet.
And there are so many people. There are just so many people out there that have left clubs that just don't have a direction or a sense of what to do. And I'm like, there has to be some outreach out there for them. They have to find a group of people. They have to take a chance on a group of people, you know, whether they're on bikes or whether they're at a church or whether they're at a park, playing chess. You know, do us a favor and take a chance to try to meet some new people, because if you stay alone with your own mind in the dark, you are going to go down a dark hole, and we're never going to see you again. So, that's my one thing.
I've joined several different social groups. I don't mean to interrupt.
Go ahead, Greg.
I've joined several different social groups. Church is a big one. And I don't go as much as I used to, but I can guarantee you there was a long time there where I was at church 3 times a week. You know, when I get in a dark place, sometimes you have to go find the light. You know what I mean? And I'm a big believer on finding some kindred group of people that are like-minded in some way. You know, men need that, whether you want to admit it or not. So I didn't mean to interrupt you. I apologize.
No, you're good. I was just going to say that I think, you know, if you're spending a lot of time away from home, you're going on road trips, you're having these new experiences, you're kind of living life at full throttle, right? And you lose that. You need to replace it with something. You need to replicate it somewhere. You know, for me, it was going to jiu-jitsu and being a part of the brotherhood of a team and being on a team and, you know, playing sports. For some of us, it's going on lifting weights or just, like you said, finding a group of guys to ride with, or church. But replacing it with a healthy hobby, I think, is one of the few ways that's actually successful to kind of, once you left club life behind or a different club or whatever, you know, because you still get a lot of those positive effects that we got in the club life without a lot of those risks that came with it.
Yeah, the working out, the exercise, that's a huge part of it too. The jiu-jitsu, whatever, some kind of physical outlet.
Yeah,
you know,
for sure.
Men need that. I just believe that.
You got to have a physical outlet, but you also got to just take that chance to try to meet a new group of people. Because when I got out of the club, my daughter had just started a junior high school at a Catholic school, and I didn't know anybody there. But they had a dad's night, like a dad's back to school night. So I showed up early, and I see a couple guys cooking and grilling on the barbecue, and I said, "Oh, well, what do you guys do here?" And they're like, "Oh, we're part of the men's club, and we cook in the kitchen once a month for the whole men's club group. There's like 130 guys that show up." And I said, "Oh, okay, cool." I'm like, "This looks great. Where do I need to go?" They're like, "You want to come?" I said, "Sure." So like it was like the next Monday. I said, "What time do I need to be there?" 3:00. I showed up at 2:45. I did that for like 5 years with those guys, and we still hang out today. And it's like they're all guys. They're just a different group of guys with a different same mentality. They need an outlet. They want to talk to people. They have everyday problems. They need some people that they know they can call at a whim's notice, and that there'll be a ear or an arm around their shoulder. I mean, it's just natural, and you can't deny that you don't need that. So even like for guys like us, it's like, yeah, we were in these top 1% motorcycle clubs. Believe me, there are great people out there in different activities that you can meet every day that would blow your mind how similar they are to guys in the motorcycle clubs. Yeah, maybe they're not the big, burly, tattooed beards, earrings, that kind of stuff that we were all used to all the time. But these guys are genuine men that really, really make you feel like you're part of something. So, yeah, Gray, I really appreciate you sharing this stuff with us today.
Hey, I appreciate you guys having me here. I really do. Thanks for just having me here. And I think that the conversation is great. The mental health with men. This is Men's Mental Health Awareness Month, right? In June. A lot of people forget that because it's also Pride Month, I think. but it is. It's Men's Mental Health Awareness Month. And I think where a lot of club members mess up, I just want to add, I think where a lot of club members mess up is that when they get into the club, they tend to forget their other group of friends, and they tend to forget that there are other groups and other activities and jiu-jitsu teams and boxing teams and all this stuff out there that you can get into. And so that if the club doesn't work out for some reason, you've still got a network. I have seen when people are out, like you guys were saying earlier, like out bad, and they don't have any contact with the club anymore. And that's basically what it means from what I understand from everywhere I've ever been. If you're out bad, that means no one in the club's supposed to talk to you anymore. And if that's your only group of friends, that can be devastating, and I had it happen to me once, and it was probably one of the lowest points in my life. I was completely devastated because I had focused all of my energy and time into this one group.
And so that you learned from that when you went into it the next time.
I learned from that.
Yeah.
And so, when I joined, I'm in a club now, and I love these guys to death. And I can tell you, I've got different friend groups, though. You know what I mean? I don't only have the club anymore. I've got other groups that I can lean on. Because you really do need that. We are social creatures. Men tend to forget that because, when you talk about your feelings, at least my generation, we just got, popped upside the head, really. But men do need to start focusing on not being alone so much, especially the veterans, because if you live inside of your head, it gets dark in there.
Yes.
When you've seen dark things, and you've got to get out into the world. You just have to,
Absolutely, because you're missing out on so many things. You're missing out. Time goes by so quick. Even just getting out with a group of guys and riding once a year on to some destination and just getting out of town. I mean, you have to have something to look forward to. You can't just bottle it all up.
Life is too short.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, you're too old to travel.
Exactly.
It depends. You know what I mean?
Well, that's one of the things that everyone from the outside looking in on guys like us looks at us and says, "How is it that you guys make the time to go ride and just go do these things that we wish we could even just attempt?" And I'm like, "Well, this is what we do. This is why we like this, But I have groups of friends, and I'm sure you guys both do too, that just are like in awe of any time we mention the fact that we were doing something with the club or on a ride with the club, because to them it's so foreign, it's so impossible. The reach is like, forget about it. And I just think like you can do those same things with a group of people from anywhere. You can plan a trip, you can go somewhere, you can do a new adventure, you can go to a different country. You just have to do it. You can't just wait.
Yeah.
You can't wait.
So some people are just happy getting in their fishing boat and going to the same lake every week, right?
Yeah.
The same river every week. They're happy, doing the same exact thing every single week, and they get into a group, but all of a sudden you're too old to actually enjoy the world. And And my hobbies include, getting on a bike and going 1,000 miles. I've actually gotten to an age where I really can't do it as much anymore. Like under doctor's orders,
Yeah.
I can't even take those real long rides anymore.
It's a tough one.
That'll hurt your feelings, right? I have a special seat and all kinds of stuff. But I've seen, so many things from the back of a motorcycle, and there's people around here that have never left the county. And it's like, man, I hate that for you.
Exactly. Mooch, did you have anything else you want to talk to Gray about today?
Yeah, just really quick. The one thing I was going to say on that topic is I think when you were talking earlier about the Sons of Anarchy generation, right? And we talked a little bit last week about traditionally back in the day, especially when you probably first started coming around clubs, the guy that joined the major club was the local tough guy. He had a reputation. People knew who he was. No one was shocked when he joined. And then I think over the years, the clubs kind of opened their door to taking anybody who was willing to join or willing to do whatever they needed to do to get in. And we started getting, this generation of, do you know who I am? These puffy-chested, because, they didn't know who they were either, right? And I think part of what we were talking about these people we see that just get devastated when the club career is over is because their identity was based off of that club, right? Like, I was Mooch the Mongol, not just Mooch. And thankfully that wasn't true for me, but you guys know what I'm saying. We see that a lot. I think if people were more just true to themselves, be the same person with or without that patch, that transition from club life back to civilian life would not be as difficult because you're still the same man you were before, same hobbies. Nothing really should change, right? I know that's easier said than done. But what kind of advice would you give to the newer generation that are trying to join clubs?
I would tell them it's nothing like you think it is. If you've been watching TV, you can read all the books you want, and your club is probably different. One of the things that have pissed me off more than anything else when a new guy comes to me and goes, I read this book and it said that we do things. And listen, that guy wasn't in this club. It doesn't matter what he said.
Unless it's the ride of my life, then that's a good book. They got sorry, shameless self-promotion. I had to throw it out there.
I'm not putting down anybody's books. I love the motorcycle books. I read them all the time. But you can't. There's no holy grail of motorcycle club books that's going to tell you how to do it. There's just not. You're only going to do it by getting out there and learning. And if you're not humble enough to learn from the guys, you're not going to last. If you're doing it to get some street cred or make a name for yourself, you're not going to last. It's like you said, it used to be that they would invite the local tough guys, into the club and come on, we need you over, come on over. And then they would beat you up to humble you. You know what I mean? That's how it was when I first joined 20 years ago. They took the biggest guy there. He'd been in prison more than he'd been on the free world. And he took me out in the backyard and kicked my ass, one-on-one. And it's a humbling experience. And all of a sudden, you start listening to these guys and learning. But very few clubs do things like that anymore. And you get a lot of guys that come in thinking that it's one way. I always tell people, hang around at least a year. Hang around. Don't be ashamed to hang around. Do it and make yourself do it for a year, and then, prospect. And during that when you're a prospect, you're not in the club yet. You can still step away anytime, and make sure that this is what you want to do. It should take a person about 2 years to figure out if you want to be with the club, in my mind. And a lot of people just jump into it, and they never even read the bylaws, and they don't even know what the club is about or what the history of the club is about. And they get these ideas from Sons of Anarchy or the Mayans or whatever is popular on television. And what they don't understand is those TV shows take like every bit of violence that every club has ever had, and they roll it all up into one story. And it's not real. And we don't need that kind of violence on the scene. We really don't. Most of us just want to party and ride.
There's a pretty famous saying about guys getting in the club, and it goes, the patch doesn't make the man makes the patch. And that's the best way we could ever put it, right? And if you just like reanalyze those words a couple times a year to yourself, so you never had to say to anybody, "Do you know who I am?" That's that line to me is like, it's like daggers in my ears.
That's the worst.
You know, and I even think to myself, I'm like, if I ever had to say, "Do you know who I am?" Like I've hit a low. I've hit a rock bottom.
Yeah.
So
real talk. Real talk.
So. Gray, we appreciate you coming on today. We're probably going to want to ask you to come back for a future episode.
Y'all hit me up anytime. It's been a pleasure, guys. You guys are really cool and down to earth. I appreciate you guys having me here. I really do. I appreciate y'all having me. I'd be more than happy to come back anytime and talk with you guys again. You're very down to earth and just like all the guys I ride with, man. So I know you can cut all that out, but
exactly.
Right
and so let's get together soon, bro. Let's keep in touch.
And you guys can find me on Instagram as Your Favorite Biker. Find me on YouTube at Your Favorite Biker and TikTok at Your Favorite Biker. Yeah, or just Google Your Favorite Biker. I'll pop right up.
Right on.
Awesome. Hit the subscribe button below and never miss an episode. Find us on Instagram at automoto.ent, at OG_mooch, at Jason_Logan81. And for more info and episodes, go to automotoentertainment.com. Special thanks to Gray. Thanks, Mooch, and thank you for tuning in. The Patch Podcast Series is brought to you by Oak and Iron, Craft Cocktail Bar in Thousand Oaks, California. By Outdoor Creations, serving the Southern California and Nashville areas.